Things are heating up in today's episode because we're talking about fire effects. And I'm really sorry for that awful pun. Let's get into it. So before we can jump into Adobe Premiere, Adobe After Effects, whatever software we're going to use for this effect, we just first want to make sure that we're capturing the footage. Now, what I'm going to do first is I'm just going to place the camera onto a tripod, and then I'm going to get a glowing light and move it around the scene. So as you can see in this scene, I have got these LED light bars and they are set to a candle slash flame slash strobing effect. And I'm placing these around the location. Now, the reason why I'm placing these around the location is because they're going to add actual, real, practical shadows onto my face, onto the location. And this is something that's going to be really difficult to emulate in the edit. So by having the practical elements within the actual scene, this is going to tie the visual effects and the footage together really, really nicely. So if you can get some flashing lights, if not, maybe just get someone to turn some lights on and off again, maybe up and down the dimmer switch, or just get somebody with a static, just a continuous light, go for something like this, and maybe just have them off screen, just moving this around, just adding a little bit of movement. You want to try and recreate the movement that you would get from the fire. So just a little bit of movement into your scene is going to go a long way. Now, once you've got this, you can load up your computer, you can drag this into your editor of choice, and we can begin with the effect. So there is a set order that we are going to follow in order to do this fire effect. The first one is going to be separating the subject from the background, and this is so that we can add the fire effects behind the subject or the person. The next step is to add the fire. Then we're going to add the smoke atmosphere. Then we can add some embers, and then we can tie it all together with some heat, distortion, and a little bit of camera movement, and that is going to finish the effect off. So let's jump into After Effects and let's do that exact process. So like I said, the first step is going to be to separate myself from the background. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to this top bar in After Effects. I'll select this button, the rotor brush tool, double click the footage, make sure the video is all the way to the very beginning, so the playhead is at the start. And we're just going to paint around ourselves like this. There we go. And you might have to jump in and make some corrections if that doesn't look right. So on Mac, I'm holding the Option button to get the red brush up. And the red brush is basically just removing parts that shouldn't be included. So as you can see, it added the sofa. We don't want to add the sofa, so I'm holding the Option button to turn that red. This is on Mac. On Windows, I believe that is Shift. Could be, I'll put it up on screen. And then once you've done that, you just want to press the space bar, and this is just going to render forward. So it's just going to go through frame by frame, analyzing the footage and just making sure that this outline follows the person. Now, you want to keep a close eye on this because this can go wrong. And if it does go wrong, then you want to try and stop it as quick as you can, because it's going to be a lot more work if you don't go back and correct it. So as you can see, I've just realized my knee is missing. So I'm just going to add that in. I'm just going to add part of my body here, and we'll just carry on. And there we go. The process has now finished. If we play this back, you can see the outline is following the person, myself, throughout the whole shot. So if I just press this button here, which is the toggle alpha overlay, you can see everything red is going to be removed and everything not red is being kept. So obviously you can see at the start, I didn't quite get my knee correctly, so that jolts a little bit. We'll ignore that for now. We can come back and fix that if it's a problem later on. But from there, we're just going to go back into composition. We're going to change our cursor back to the selection tool. We're just going to copy this video footage. So we'll go Command C, Command V, or if you are on Windows, I believe that is Control C, Control V. On the bottom layer, we're just going to delete the rotor brush and refine edge tool, and then on the top, it should be there. So this basically means that we have the isolated video on the top, and we have the normal non-edited video on the bottom. So we've essentially split the subject from the background like this. So if I turn off the background, subject, turn it back on. So now we can place fire behind the person, and this is just going to help to add some realism. But for now, I'm just going to turn that top layer off because it's just going to slow everything down. And we can start adding some fire into the composition. So I'm just going to go into my fire bin. And as you can see, I have downloaded some fire assets. Now, I downloaded these from Production Crate, and Production Crate is like an asset library. So you can download fire footage, you can add magic, you can download sparks. There's so many different things that you can download from Production Crate. This isn't a sponsored video, but I love their work. So if you are looking for these assets, then I would recommend getting their subscription because it's really awesome. But anyway, I'm just going to go through and start adding some of these. So as you can see, I've got loads of different elements. So I've got ceiling fire, I've got ground fire. So let's start with some ground fire. So I'm just going to drag all of the ground fires on top of this video footage. I'm just going to turn them all off except for one, and we'll work our way up. So rather than having loads to work with, we'll just start off and just go piece by piece. And I'm just going to lock the background so that we don't accidentally move it, and the same with the top layer. Cool, so this is just going to be a floor fire. So I'm just going to find somewhere to place that. I can scale this down. And as you can see at the moment, the rotation isn't correct. So I'm just going to search for basic 3D. It doesn't look like it's sitting on the floor. So if we go to tilt, we can tilt this down and we can make it look like it's sitting on the floor just a little bit more. Not perfect, but that'll do for now. Let's go to the next asset. So we'll turn this one on. We'll place this over here somewhere. That's fine. That does exactly what it needs to do. Let's go to the next one. Number 3, we'll scale this one down. So you can press S to bring up scale, or you can just drag these corners down to scale that down. This is just going to be some more fire. Great, does what it needs to do. Let's turn the next layer on. And as you can see, I'm essentially just stacking all of these assets on top of each other. There we go, you can see that shaping up quite nicely so far. Let's go for the next one. This is quite a big fire, so I'm going to place this in the foreground. There we go, that looks really nice. Really, really cool. Turn the next one on. This again can be another foreground layer. We're going to make this really big. And later on, we're going to add a 3D camera effect. So I'm going to make it look like the camera is pushing through the flames. So by having fire in the foreground, it gives us that foreground layer to push through. I think it's going to really work really well. There you go. I'm just going to make a quick adjustment to this one here. It looks a bit random there. So let me just find that fire. There it is. Great. So that is our foreground fire effect now working. So I'm just going to close these all down. This is our ground. So now we're going to go back into our fire bin. What do we have? We've got some wall fire. So let's go for some wall fire. I'm going to place this underneath the ground fire because you want to think about your layers. So this is at the front. So this would therefore be on top. So anything behind that needs to be underneath it. So same thing again, we're just going to turn those all off and we're just going to work through these one by one. So wall fire 33, we can place on the back wall. I'm going to scale that down a pinch. Let's see how that looks. Nice, but what I'm going to do, I'm going to make it look like it's coming from the sofa. So I'm just going to pull that down, rotate it around a little bit. And that's pretty decent. I'm pretty happy with that. Obviously, you can see that my foreground layer needs to go on top. So when I turn this back on, you can see I'm now going to appear in front of the fire. But obviously, this is going to take long to render out, so we'll just ignore that for now. Let's go down to the next layer. This is a much taller one, so I'm going to place this on the wall on the left. And it looks like it touches the ceiling at the top. Yeah, you can see it looks like it almost touches the ceiling. So this is absolutely perfect in our example because the ceiling is up there, so we can have that touching the ceiling. And if I bring this up, I can make it look like it's these plugs that have caused the problem. Great. Next layer, we are stacking up again. Let's add some fire onto the right of the frame. Let's add it in over here. I'm going to add some basic 3D to that layer though, just to tilt this around a pinch. And then tilt it down as well. So with a little bit of swivel, a little bit of tilt, just to get the rotation correct on the wall. So here. And as you can see, at this point in time, the computer is starting to have a hard time. So I'm just going to drop the quality down to 3rd. And then when we come to render this out, I can just pull this back up to full quality. But you can see just by laying in these simple assets, just by stacking all of these on top of each other, the effect is really coming to life now. So next wall fire is just going to be this one. And where can I place this? I might add this onto the other existing fire effect over here. So I'm just going to rotate that around to line it with the sofa. Scale that down a pinch. And I'll just nudge the original one over to the left. Cool. So let's go back to our project bin. And let's see what else we've got. So let's go for some wall sparks. So let's pretend that the electrical outlet is starting to spark. So if I just solo this layer, you can see we're starting to get some sparks. It almost looks like it's melting away. So if I add this roughly to where the plugs are and we scale this down, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to solo this and I'm going to solo the background just so I can see where this is actually going. Scale this down onto the plugs. It doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to look like it's coming from something. It's going to be buried amongst the fire. So like I said, it doesn't need to be perfect, but that does what it needs to do. I'm going to copy and paste that one in. I'm just going to add another one of those. I might make it a little bit bigger and I'm just going to add it over here on the right maybe. So as if it's coming from the wall, maybe it's coming from this electrical outlet here. Great, that looks cool. So let's just turn the solo off so we can see everything combined again. Let's see what else we have. So I've got some embers here. So if I quickly scrub through, this is going to be our foreground element here. So if we add this to the very top, we'll even add this on top of our person layer. As you can see, these are the embers. Now this is a 2K file rather than a 4K file, so I just need to increase the size of this. And then when I turn everything back on, it's just going to add that foreground. So now we need to do a little bit of organization and stack these together. So the embers are going to be at the very front. They're going to be in front of everything. Then this foreground fire, this floor fire, that would be in front of myself. And at the moment, myself, the isolated layer, is sitting here. So I need to place this underneath the wall fire. So at the very top is the foreground and at the very bottom is the background. So we've got the embers at the front. Then we've got the ground fire, which is all of this here. And then we've got myself, and then we've got the wall fire behind that. So we're kind of creating this stack. Now, I can just keep going and going and going. I am going to add one ceiling fire onto this. So I'm just going to add this onto the top. Add this on up here. I'm going to scale this down a little bit. There you go. It's not perfect, but that will do for now. I can always come back and clean this up later on. But now what I'm going to do to tie this all together, I'm going to add some smoky atmosphere. So you know the saying, when there's smoke, there is fire. So I wouldn't have this massive fire and have no smoke. It wouldn't be coming through this clean. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add some smoke. So if I just scroll through my assets, smoky atmosphere. So let's go for one of these. We'll add it to the very top of everything. And as you can see, that's just added smoke onto everything. Cool, that looks really good. Let me just add another smoky atmosphere just to make this really, really smoky. Here we go. And then we can turn the isolated layer back onto this. So this means I'm going to be in front of this fire now. And let's see how this is coming together. Okay, now just for time's sake, I'm just going to call it quits there and just have a look at this first second. So as you can see, it does look pretty cool so far, but there's a few things that I need to work on. So first of all, I need to color grade my base footage. So I'm going to do that. I feel like because the fire is so bright, either the fire needs to go up or the footage of myself needs to come down. So I'm going to work on bringing the exposure of the original footage down a pinch. So I'm just going to search for levels, drop that onto the base layer, and we're just going to pull the gamma down a bit. Here we go. We'll pull the gamma down to 0.6. And then of course, because we've got this layer on top, we need to add that onto this layer. So copy that and paste that onto there. So this is the foreground layer. Cool, there you go. So you can see that's starting to look a little better now. Now I feel like this needs to be warmed up a little bit. I feel like there's a lot of red hot fire in the room. So I feel like the room would be a lot more orange. So I'm going to go back onto the original layer. So I'm just going to search for curves. I'm going to drop curves onto the original background layer. We're going to go into red, and I'm just going to increase the red here. So we'll increase the red highlights. We'll increase the red shadows. We'll increase the red midtones. And for those that don't know, the curves, you've got the shadows down here, you've got the highlights up here. And if you go up to the top left, you're increasing the brightness. And if you go down to the bottom right, you're decreasing the brightness, so you're making it darker. So you can make your midtones darker without affecting the highlights and the midtones. It's a really cool effect. Now from here, I'm just going to adjust the greens just to get a little bit more of a balance. There we go. I'm trying to color match the flame as much as possible. We'll go to the blue. We'll just do some more adjustments here. I'm going to pull some of this blue out. I feel like it's a very hot, very warm room. Nice, that looks good. And now I'm just going to copy those curves and I'm just going to paste them onto the isolated foreground person layer. So let's see how that looks once it comes up, once it's rendered. There we go. That does look a lot better. Now, at the moment, as you can see, this edge doesn't look very clean, and I believe that is just because of our third quality resolution. There we go. As you can see, that looks a lot better now that I've dropped it into full quality. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get some light to affect the scene. There's a lot of fire here, and even though I had practical lights within the scene, there would be a lot more flickering and a lot more kind of lights happening. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Layer, New, Adjustment Layer. Then I'm going to go into Levels, drag that onto the Adjustment Layer 1. We'll drag Adjustment Layer 1 to the very, very top, like so. We're going to increase the white, like this. Then we're just going to draw some masks. So you can go to the pen tool and do some custom masks if you wanted to, like this. Or you could go to the square or the ellipse tool. I'm just going to go for the ellipse tool for now, just because it's quicker and easier. And I'm just going to do a circle over here. I'm going to do a circle over here, a little bit of a circle over here, and then I'll do a circle down here. Cool. Now we'll go into all of those masks, and we're just going to increase the feather on all of those. There we go. And now we're going to press T on the keyboard to load opacity. We'll hold the Option button. That is on Mac. I believe on Windows it is Alt. So we'll press Option, click on the stopwatch icon, and this is going to load up the expression window. And in the expression window, we are just going to type in the expression wiggle, open brackets, 5,20. And then do not press enter, because if you press enter, you break the code. So if we just press out of here, what we have done is we have essentially created a wiggle expression to be, let's turn this effect on and off. So we're creating a flickering. So rather than having to manually flicker, this is going to do an auto flicker for us. It's a really cool shortcut and a great way of animating without going in and being really time consuming. Now, because I've got this rotoscoped foreground layer on, this is going to take forever to render for me. So I'm just going to turn that off for now. So ignore the fact that I'm on top of the fire. So I'm going to turn that off, and I'm just going to render this out for a second, just so we can see how this looks. There we go. I know it's a short preview, but you can see you've got all of the fire assets. You've got this glowing lights in all of the different assets. It's making the fire look really, really hot. So there's just a few more things to do now to wrap this up. We're going to add a nice push in, and we're going to get this foreground fire moving at a separate speed so that it looks like we're pushing through the fire. And then we're going to add some turbulent displacement to add some heat distortion. And then we're pretty much there. So here we go. So we're going to go Layer, New, Null Object. We'll drag the null to the top. And then everything, if you just highlight everything for now, make sure nothing is locked, make sure everything is unlocked. Highlight everything except for the null. And we're just going to go into Parent and Link, and we'll select None. And then we're going to go and select Null 1. So we are parenting everything to the null object. So now when we animate the null object, everything will be affected. However, we don't want this foreground fire layer to be affected though. So we are just going to find where they are. So it's not the smoky atmosphere, it's not the ceiling fire, it's one of our ground fire assets. So this one we're going to remove, so that can be none. This one will be a foreground layer as well, so we'll turn that off from the null. And then this one can be, let's have a look. Yeah, let's go for this one. This one can also be one that animates on its own. So that's this one here. So we're going to turn that off and we'll group those together so it's a bit easier to keep those together. Now we're going to go and create another null. So layer, new, null object. This will be null 2. And we're going to parent those foreground layers onto null 2. So we're affecting everything all together except for the foreground layers because we're going to affect those separately. So let's go to the very beginning. We'll go into null object. We'll press S on the keyboard to load up scale. Create a brand new keyframe at the very beginning. We'll go through to the end and we're going to change that to, let's go 110. So we've got 100 all the way up to 110. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go to null 2. We'll press S on the keyboard. We'll create a brand new keyframe at the beginning at 100 and then we'll scroll through to the end and we'll make that 130. So as you can see, they're moving at a faster rate than everything else. And by doing so, it means we end up with this really cool dynamic effect where it looks like the camera is pushing through the foreground fire. Great. Now my next step would be to just extend these out. So because these are loopable fire assets, I just need to copy and paste them. So if I just highlight these, copy and paste, extend them out. And then we just need to make sure that these are linked to null 1. And we need to do that again. So just link that to null 1 again, making sure that the cursor is at the very beginning. Then you can just go through, just make sure that all of these different layers are looping to the end of the video. So once you've done all of this, what we're going to do is we're just going to highlight everything, right click and select pre-compose. And you can rename this if you want. We can call this fire. We'll press OK and that's put everything into its own pre-composition. Now, if we go into the fire pre-comp and we just isolate the background layer, just because it's going to be so much easier to work with if we just isolate the background layer. We go back to the main comp and we search for turbulent displace in effects and presets. We're going to drag that onto the fire pre-comp. And as you can see, we've now got some jelloing going on. So if we take this back to the beginning, you can see it looks a bit funky. So we need to first animate this. So if we go into evolution, create a brand new keyframe at the beginning, we'll scroll through to the end of the video and we'll just pull this around a little bit. So as you can see, we're getting this jelloing effect happening, but obviously at the moment looks a bit extreme, doesn't look great. So we're going to go into these settings and we're going to pull the amount down. So we're going to pull this up to maybe around 10. We're going to pull the size down to a much smaller number. Let's see how this looks. It's not coming through enough. Let's increase the size. Nice, we can maybe pull the amount up just to pinch and pull the size down. This is just a fine-tune act. You just want to make sure that you're spending the time to make sure this looks proper. And if you wanted to, you could actually animate these. So we can start off with amount and size set. So we'll set the keyframe. We'll go halfway through. We can pull the amount down and we can pull the size up. We can move across. We can go the opposite direction. And then we can go to the end and we'll flip it one more time. There we go. So if we play this back, you can see we've got some jelloing happening, although I would argue that it's probably not visible enough. So I'm going to go to this second keyframe and we're going to make this quite extreme. There you go. As you can see, you're really starting to see that heat effect coming through. You're starting to see it, especially around here, where the numbers on the amount are quite small. Great. There we go. So now we can just go back into the fire pre-comp. We can unsolo that. We can turn on this overlay layer again. Then we can go back to the main pre-comp. We can render this out. And this is going to be our fire effect now complete. And if you wanted to, we could always just add on the typical movie bars to make this look a little bit cinematic. So we can go layer, new solid, create a brand new black solid. We'll press OK. We'll go up to this mask here, which is the rectangle tool. We'll make sure the proportional grid is turned on by selecting this icon, proportional grid turned on, and then you can just draw around these lines as a guide. Press inverted on the black solid in mask, and you've just created a movie bar. And if you wanted to make this smaller, then you can just increase the scale. If you want to make it tighter, then just decrease. So I'm going to go for somewhere around there. Just going to shift the position of this up, just so we can see that foreground layer coming through. And there we go. If you wanted to, from here, you can do some more color grading. So if you go into Lumetri, drop Lumetri onto the file layer, you can now go into Creative, and you can add some LUTs if you wanted to. So you can go through these pre-installed Adobe LUTs, and then we can add a little bit more contrast in. So let's make that really punchy. And personally, I think that orange looks a little bit weird. So I'm just going to increase the temperature, just to make that really hot. And I'm going to pull the levels down even more. So search for levels, drag that underneath Lumetri. And I'm just going to pull the gamma down a pinch, just to make this really hot and really intense. And now, once we render this out and we play this back, you can see we've got this really awesome fire effect now created inside of Adobe After Effects. And there you go. That is the tutorial now complete. What did you think of it? Was it a decent tutorial? Do you feel like you learned something? If so, let me know in the comment section below. And if you've got any video ideas at all, if you want to see something cool and interesting in the next tutorial, you want to see something very specific, just let me know and I'll see if I can make a video for you in the future. But thank you ever so much for watching this video. I really do appreciate it. And hopefully I will see you on the next episode. See you there.